This is Awareness Explorers.
Welcome back, friends and family, to Awareness Explorers. I'm your co-host, Jonathan Robinson. I'm with my friend and trusty co-host sidekick,
Brian Tom O'Connor.
There we go. And today we are going to do an exploration. We hope that you kind of join in on this exploration. We'll be talking about stuff, but the basic topic is how to enter into a feeling of mystery and wonder. And we will be focusing on how to do that through asking certain questions. So it's been interesting. Before the podcast, Brian, we talked about this episode, and it will be an exploration because we're not 100% sure what we're going to say, although we both have a big value for mystery and wonder. And there's a lot of ways to eliminate mystery and wonder from our life. So most people don't have that. So we're going to talk about what some of the obstacles are and how we can use questions to re-enter what really should be a natural state for us, which is mystery and wonder. But after that long soliloquy, when you think of doing this show and entering into mystery and wonder through questions, what came up for you?
Well, you know, it's funny because when we were planning this, at first I thought, well, gee, I'm not going to have very much to say in this episode at all, because I thought we started out by talking about whether there are forces that intervene in our affairs or is there free will, et cetera. And I'm not, I don't want to pretend I know the answer to these things. And I also don't want to pretend I think that it's important to know the answers to these things, which is, I think, where I hope we're heading.
Yeah, you know, it's interesting that the mind has a lot of ways to eliminate mystery and wonder. And one of the popular ones, is to come up with answers to unknowable questions. You know, like, how'd the universe begin? Well, people will say, oh, the Big Bang. Okay, they just eliminated a huge amount of mystery and wonder, because even the Big Bang, if you think about it, makes no sense whatsoever. Basically, the Big Bang says that something that a millionth the size of an atom contained all the material of the entire universe. Imagine the Earth being in the size of an atom, and then expand that by 100 trillion. Well, it makes no sense that out of something smaller than an atom, everything exploded into being all at once. But if you just say, oh, how'd the universe begin? The Big Bang. You've just eliminated something that, if you contemplate it, would make your head explode. Your head would become the Big Bang at that point.
Yeah, and even more mysterious is something coming out of nothing.
Yeah.
I don't think our brains are actually equipped to understand that. And accepting that fact and allowing that fact is a step towards enjoying and reveling in mystery and wonder.
Absolutely. And, you know, it can be hard to enter into that sense of, I can't possibly grok or understand this. There's resistance. The mind doesn't like that. You know, I do magic tricks. And when I do magic tricks, people always say, oh, I know how you did that. I think to this day, no one has ever guessed correctly about how a magic trick was done. But what's interesting to me is they always feel like they know how it's done. And that's what the mind does. It comes up with answers. You know, if you interviewed an ant and said, so what do you think about this quantum physics thing? It would probably come up with an answer, but it would have nothing to do with quantum physics. You know, the ant might feel more secure. Yeah, I know what's going on. Yeah, you know, I understand the Big Bang and everything. And we're basically like those ants saying, yeah, my mind understands this completely unknowable thing. And we do that because it makes us feel more comfortable, makes us feel like we know what's going on. And it makes us feel kind of big, rather than this feeling of, I live in an infinite, unknowable universe, and I'm a little ant that just happens to be here for the moment.
Yeah, I suppose if you think of it that way, you could feel small and that might not feel good. And so you might want to find answers that help you feel good. As a matter of fact, that's what most thought is, looking for
Yeah.
answers to problems and hoping that the answers we find make us feel good so that we don't feel bad. And it's a never ending battle because the mind is never going to come up with what really is going to make us feel good, which is that we are the universe. We are one. We're not a little ant, but we're not our individual selves either, our body and mind. And that knowingness is something that can lead to a certain kind of a wisdom. But then again, on the other hand, it can become solidified into a concept. And
Mhm.
now we think we know it, and we can spout the non-duality lingo with conviction. And and we have to realize that even then, even like what I just said, can't be the real truth. And accepting that we can't know, I think is the Buddhists call it don't know mind.
Mhm.
I think is a state with a lot to offer.
Yeah, and for us to experience that state and go beyond the mind, we want to explore methods that can help, but we also have to see that almost everything, and perhaps everything the mind does, is to try to eliminate that sense of mystery, to get on top of things, and that you can't really use the mind to get to mystery. You have to somehow go beyond it. In the Zen tradition, they have Zen koans, like what's the sound of one hand clapping? And people try to use the mind, and maybe they make a sound or they do something or they read a book about how to how to answer that. But what that koan is geared towards is trying to get people beyond the mind into some kind of direct experience. And it's the same with the question, Ramana Maharshi's question, who are you? To say, oh, I'm Jonathan or I'm a person. None of those answers are doing anything for you. Certainly not going beyond the mind. They're pointing to something, and you can't really use your mind to get to the thing that they're pointing to.
Yeah, that's right. And that's a really good point that the questions like, and I'm glad you brought up Ramana Maharshi and self-inquiry, because these kind of questions like, who am I? Or what is this me? Or what does my experience appear in? Basically, we think that we are asking the question so that we can come up with the answer, but it's not the purpose of asking the questions. The purpose of asking the question is to redirect our attention from the content of awareness to awareness itself, from what is noticed to that which is doing the noticing, which is the background of pure awareness. And that can lead us to know and experience non-conceptually, non-mentally, our true nature.
Absolutely. And, I used to have a teacher who said, answers kill and mystery heals.
Mm, nice.
And that sense of mystery, or of a sense of how little we know of our own smallness, I think is an important ingredient in the spiritual buffet. And if you don't have it, you start to feel kind of important and big rather than small enough to be part of everything. So there's various ways to enter into mystery and wonder, and there's things like drugs that we talked about. There's luck, maybe somebody like Eckhart Tolle just goes down a rabbit hole and that works. There's of course meditations that can help, that open you up to that sense of the overwhelming mystery of the universe. And there's contemplations that can help. And that's kind of what some of the questions we'll be looking at today can do. But before we go into those questions, I found it interesting as we were preparing for this podcast that you and I, as young kids, I'm thinking around age 4. I don't know what age it was for you. I did a certain contemplation based on a question, and the question could best be described as, let's see, it's hard to put it into words, but it was kind of like, what is infinity, or what's at the end of the universe?
Mhm. Yeah, my similar one was, what if there was nothing?
Uh-huh. And I used to imagine being on a spaceship going really fast, and then there'd be a wall. And then I'd realize on the other side of the wall, it still goes on forever. And
Hmm.
then what is forever and what is infinity? And then sometimes it was the question, what if there was nothing ever and I didn't exist and there was nothing for eternity? And all these questions were a springboard to experience something that was very profound, of being very small. It would sometimes get a little scary, and it would be an overwhelming sense of the bigness of the universe and how unknowable it was. How would you describe your experience?
Yeah, it was a mysterious, weird, but weirdly enjoyable feeling. I would imagine there was nothing. And then what if there was nothing? If there was nothing, then I would not be here to experience it because
Yeah.
there would be nothing. And that sort of paradox led me to a feeling that was different from my identification with that body lying in the bed doing this imagining. It was an identification with a kind of a concept free knowingness, a kind of emptiness. And it, I couldn't have put any of these words to it at the time, but the feeling of it was something I really liked and I wanted more of. And that was actually the very first awareness game. I mean, everything else sort of leads from that, from the concept of playing with your mind to create a kind of a joyful feeling.
Yeah, I remember it being both a little scary and very exhilarating and expansive. So I felt both small and huge at the same time. It was a very unusual experience.
I know that feeling. I would lie in bed and sometimes I would have my fingers touching each other and they would expand and contract. Like sometimes they were right next to each other with no space in between them, and sometimes they felt like there was a giant log in between them. So things would start to morph and size and space and sense of all of that would um, start to shift. And I actually found that fun. Perhaps some people might find it scary. I found it fun, and I just, went on exploring and playing with my mind in different ways.
Mhm. And I think different questions can evoke that sense of mystery, awe, wonder, bigness, smallness, whatever you want to call it, that you have to find the contemplation or question that helps you go beyond your mind.
Mhm.
And that will be different for different people. Now, I've known people who literally can look at a tree and say, what is a tree? Or maybe look at DNA and how that happened or whatever. So it can be very different. We're going to go into some more questions, and in the meditation, I'll guide people through several questions that can evoke mystery and wonder. But the general idea is in the direction of smallness, humility, expansiveness, but a sense like things are so much bigger than your mind that it can't be comprehended.
Yeah, that's right. And before we go on, I want to just say a couple of things. One is we're not talking about science. We're not putting down science. We're not putting down curiosity and the desire to know and understand how things work. These are valuable and wonderful things. We're talking about the narrow field of knowing our true nature as awareness and what's useful for that. So where things that are very useful for science are less useful in this sphere. And the reason that they're less useful in this sphere is my second point. which is that the mind's purpose is to make distinctions between things, and language's purpose is also to make distinctions between things. And if it's true that the universe is one, that there is only one infinite energy rising and falling in temporary forms, then the mind cannot comprehend that, because the mind can only comprehend distinctions between things. So, like one of my teachers, Locke Kelly, had a very simple phrase. He said, drop below the neck.
Hmm.
And I found that useful, because when we let go of our words and our concepts for things, it's easier to then shift our attention to the background in which all appears, and all concepts appear in it, and therefore it itself is not a concept.
Yeah, yeah, that's well said. My friend John Aston, who we interviewed on this program, a previous episode, he recently said, language is to describe things, but in reality, there are no things.
Yeah.
You might call this a hairbrush, but really it's connected to the arm, which is connected to the chair, which is connected to the floor, which is connected to the ground, which is connected to the earth, and there is no separate anything really.
That's right. But the danger of that is that when you say there is no hairbrush, or there are no things, a lot of people's mind will start to argue and say, well, yes, there is. I mean, like the famous 18th century philosopher, I forget, Samuel Johnson, maybe, I forget, he kicked the ottoman and he said, I refute it thus. But I think that saying that these things are unreal, or that they don't exist, actually what we're saying is what you said: they don't exist separately.
Mm-hmm.
They don't have their own separate existence. They are like a wave is not separate from the ocean. The hairbrush is not separate from your hand or the air around it. It is all energy moving, rising,
Mm-hmm.
falling, taking temporary shapes. And so we think of it as not that it doesn't exist, but that it doesn't exist as a separate thing. And I
Mm-hmm.
think that's a better way of looking at there are no things, which is true, unless you take it really literally and start engaging your brain about it.
Yeah, yeah. So in trying to get beyond the mind of separateness, certain questions can point us to the mystery, the vastness, the oneness, the unfathomableness of reality. And those questions are meant to be played with and not answered, but they are pointers to the moon. So I'll talk about a few of my favorite questions, and maybe you can offer a couple. One is, if you really want your head to start having smoke come out of your ears, is what does infinity mean? When some physicists say the universe is infinite, what, try to imagine that. You can't imagine it, because all imagination involves some kind of end. And if you go down that rabbit hole as a contemplation, it can take you into a place beyond the mind.
Mhm.
Another one of mine favorite ones is with the one you said earlier. What if there was nothing ever existed?
Mhm.
Or if you believe in God, I tend to be, it depends on your definition, but I tend to believe in God. How did God get here? Or if there isn't a God, how did anything get here? How did, what was happening before the Big Bang? These are all questions that there are no scientific answers to, but you want to find a question that takes you beyond your mind. What happens after we die? A lot of the Zen koans really fit this category. What's the Zen koan? Who were you before you were born? I think that's one of them.
Yeah, what was your original face before your parents were born, or something like that?
Yeah, yeah,
I,
yeah.
I'm paraphrasing. I haven't memorized them, but I've read a lot of them, and they're similar to that.
Uh-huh. And using these to point to the moon and not to come up with an answer is a learned skill, and one that you got to be really focused. You have to be able to sit with a little bit of discomfort and fear sometimes. And if you feel exhilarated, expansive, or extremely small, I think you're headed in the right direction.
Mhm. Yeah, and as I said before, and I think it can bear repeating, the trap is to look for logical conceptual answers. And that's
Mm-hmm.
not what we're talking about. The real way is to allow them to redirect your attention to a an empty, concept-free, pure awareness zone and identify with that. Or you can, if you don't like that terminology, a sense of wonder, which is what we
Mm-hmm.
started with.
Yeah, yeah. Um, are there, other than the question, what if there was nothing, are there any other contemplations, questions that have impacted you that way?
Yeah, my favorite have to do with the body. Like, for instance, my hand. What do I mean by my hand? What is the my that, what is the I that that my refers to? And then expand it, my body. Who has a body?
Mm-hmm.
Who is the I behind the my of my body? And
Uh-huh.
to me, that can help take us to identification with spaciousness as opposed to individual body, mind, personality.
Mm-hmm.
Who has a mind? Or how about this? When words go through your head, who are they talking to?
Uh-huh. Uh-huh. I remember on one LSD trip I took many years ago, I spent a few hours on the how do I move my hand? Uh, which worked for me. Like, how is this happening? And because we don't really have any idea. And I like listening to physicists on YouTube, and you sometimes see them open up to this childlike wonder as they talk about the nature of reality. So they go into some technical questions like, what is time? Ends up we don't know what time is. Time can go forwards and backwards according to physics formulas. So they don't really have they can't nail it down. And the mind wants to nail it down, but it's like throwing jello at the wall. It keeps on refusing to be nailed down.
Mhm.
And there's a lot of things in the nature of reality that are kind of like that.
Yeah, and then another thing is the sense of the miraculous. I like to do this. I like to say things like, isn't it miraculous that one cup is white and one cup is green? Isn't it miraculous that that colors appear different from each other? And where do they appear? And that's another good question. Where is my experience? If I hear a sound, where am I hearing that?
Mm-hmm.
Am I hearing it inside? And if the answer is no, I'm hearing it outside, then just try. What if it were true that I was hearing it inside? What if all experience was happening inside?
Mm-hmm.
That's another one.
Yeah. Um, I'm glad you brought up the topic of miracles because I've had a lot of really unexplainable miracles happen in my life. And when I contemplate them, they can lead me to this sense of awe and wonder. I may have mentioned this on a previous episode, but I was trying to get into the Senate of Canada, and they have a lot of security there, like airport security. And the guy told me to take off my glasses and put it in the tray, which is even more intense than they have in US airports. So I put my glasses in there and my belt and my shoes and things like that. And my glasses did not appear on the other end of the X-ray machine. And I've mentioned before that sometimes things disappear around me and show up in impossible locations. In this case, they stopped the whole machine to look for my glasses. They couldn't find it. And my wife, who had been gone through the security, was already in the Canadian Senate. She calls me after 10 minutes. She didn't know what was going on. And she said, "What's going on?" I said, "Well, I call it my gremlin took my glasses." And this happens about twice a year to me where things move. And she says, "I know where your glasses are." And I said, "Where?" And she said, "Well, when you didn't show up and get through security, I went into the zipper part of my purse to get my phone, and your glasses are there." Now, some people listening to this will say, this didn't happen or whatever, but 6 security people saw it happen, or they saw my glasses go into the X-ray machine and not go out the X-ray machine, and then they ended up the same pair of glasses in my wife's purse 50 yards away in the zipper pocket. Now, when something like that happens, I try to my mind first says, "Oh, okay, this is impossible. What's another explanation? Maybe my wife blacked out. She put it in her purse like that." And she said, "No, that's not what happened," And you like search for an answer, just like we search for an answer, like how the universe began. And I said, "No, there is no answer in my field of concepts. I just have to imagine, okay, my glasses disappeared and somehow showed up in an impossible location again. Luckily, this happens about twice a year to me, so I don't doubt it anymore. But as I think of how that happened and try to feel into the universe in which things can disappear and show up in another location impossibly, that fills me with a sense of wonder and mystery. And that makes me think, okay, well, I like to think I know what's going on here, but I clearly don't.
When you first told me that story, it was actually quite a while ago. I had the reaction that you described. My mind raced to find a logical explanation,
Yeah,
something that how could this have happened? And you didn't realize that it had happened, that it actually your wife took it out of the bin and no one noticed her taking it out of the bin and blah, blah, blah.
right.
And that's and in terms of the topic of today's conversation, that's the kind of thinking that isn't particularly useful.
Right.
It might be useful in another situation where someone is being tried for some crime and we need to find out what happened. But that's not what we're talking about. What we're talking about now is what if I cannot know why or how that happened? What
Yeah.
if it is unknowable? And by extension, what if anything is unknowable? What if the reason for any existence is unknowable?
Yeah. Yeah. Remember Ram Dass would talk about what his guru would do. And at first it was just very disconcerting because he would say, "Well, that's impossible." And then he kind of relaxed into like, "Okay, I don't know what's going on," and enjoyed that feeling. It can be a very expansive feeling.
Mhm. And for people for whom these things don't happen, like they don't happen for me.
Yeah.
Um, you've described many instances of them happening for you, and I believe they do. And who knows why they happen to you and why they don't happen to me. But for people for whom they don't happen, we tend not to believe. People who've never seen a ghost tend not to believe in ghosts, etc.
Hmm. Hmm.
And It's not about whether you believe in it or not. It's not about whether it exists or not. It's not about whether it happens or not. The question is, if I knew the answer to all of these, what good would it do me? And in terms
Mhm.
of our exploration here into our true nature, I believe usually the answer is zero.
Yeah.
It would
Yeah.
not, it's not, it wouldn't, even if we did know. Like, what if we knew the answer to whether there was free will or not? You know, well, you know, my favorite answer every anyone ever came up to that was this. It is not true that there is free will. It is also not true that there is no free will. And that was like a Zen koan that
Yeah.
just exploded my mind into not knowing this. And that's what we're talking about.
That's the key, is to create the perfect Zen koan for you, the what works for you. I was once on a plane, I may have mentioned this once before, with I asked the guy next to me, what he did for a living. He said he's a professor on photosynthesis. He spent, he was like 76 years old. And he said, I've spent 55 years studying photosynthesis, and I've written 9 books about it, or whatever it was. It was a while ago. And I said, so what's it like to know, everything about photosynthesis? And he said, oh, no, no. I used to think I knew a lot about photosynthesis. Now I have no clue what's going on about photosynthesis. It's like it's a total mystery wonder. Like I can't believe it. And he'd spent 55 years. He said he was the leading authority in the world on it. And that's the way it is, that our mind just grabs onto a very simple thing and thinks it labels a tree. Oh, I know what a tree is. This guy has no idea what a tree is, and he studied it for 55 years. So
That is
that's
wisdom. That is
yeah.
wisdom. Yeah, I love that story. And before you go on, it reminds me of another story about the miraculous. Um, I had a friend who was an actress named Betsy Parish. Elizabeth
Mhm.
Parish was her stage name, and she was friends with the famous acting teacher Stella Adler. And Stella and Betsy would go into a supermarket and play a game with each other. They would pick up something like an orange, and they would say, "What's this? I don't know. It's round. It feels, oh, here, feel it. Oh, it's a little soft. Oh, it has an aroma. I have no idea what this is." And they would take objects like that and pretend that they knew nothing about it and that it was just an amazing miracle that it existed. And ever since
Which
I
it
did that,
is.
oh, what a wonderful game. And it is
Yeah.
an amazing miracle that it
Right,
exists.
right.
And we don't really know. Knowing that it's an orange, knowing that it's a citrus fruit, even knowing what it tastes like, doesn't mean we really know it or why it even is.
Yeah, so it's really an attitude, the latest Zen koan could be, what is an orange? And you can travel that down the rabbit hole to that we don't know anything really. And yet everything is made up of hundreds of levels of quarks and atoms and molecules and how it got here. And everything leads to everything.
Yeah, right. Like the famous quote, I forget who said it, but if you wanted the recipe to bake an apple pie, you'd have to invent the universe. I think it was, the famous scientist who had the TV show,
Don't know who that is.
um, billions and billions.
Oh, Carl Sagan.
Yeah,
Yeah,
Carl
right.
Sagan.
Right. Yeah, yeah.
But yeah, I don't know. I mean, to me, this is a mantra worth worth repeating. I don't know.
Yeah,
I
I
don't
don't
know.
know.
I don't know.
Hmm. That could be another way to get to beyond the mind to mystery and wonder. So I'm going to guide people in a meditation, and the hope is that as I guide them in the meditation, that they aim towards not knowing mystery and wonder.
Goody.
And if you move in that direction, then that's probably what we're trying to do. So, as usual, take some time to make yourself comfortable and take a few slow breaths. Close your eyes if it's safe to do so. I'd like to begin this meditation by having you remember a time you experienced what you would call a miracle. It could have been something you couldn't explain or something that left you in awe and wonder. It could be an event recently or long ago. It might be something that other people don't think of as a miracle, but hit you that way. So take some time to remember and focus on one such experience. As you remember this event, try to remember as many details as you can, such as what exactly triggered it, how you felt, and what it was like to be left with a sense of mystery and wonder. Because our minds like to be in control, we often try to rationally explain things that are not, that are, well, perhaps unexplainable. And it can feel uncomfortable to feel like a small and vulnerable human in a large and unfathomable universe. However, in a moment, as I ask you to contemplate a few questions, see if you can open up to the feeling of vast mystery, of being a small ape contemplating a wondrous and unknowable universe. And don't try to answer any of these forthcoming questions with your mind. Instead, use these questions as a springboard to wonder and mystery. And the first question for you to contemplate is, what does it mean, as many physicists suggest, that the universe is infinite? Take a moment or a minute now to contemplate what infinity means or is. If it helps to visualize something such as an end to the universe and then see that at that supposed end, it actually goes on for another forever. If the universe is infinite, does that mean there's another you in some other galaxy? Another question: how did anything, God, the universe, and all the billions of galaxies ever come into being? How'd they ever come into being? Remember to let go of your mind trying to figure it out and maybe contemplating, what if nothing ever came into being and there was nothing forever, for eternity? What would that have been like? What if nothing ever came into being? Or how did anything come into being? You might contemplate, was there anything before the Big Bang? And if there wasn't anything, what was that like? Those are all different angles. But here's another contemplation. Could science or advanced AI and human knowledge ever know everything, or will there always be something unknowable and beyond our comprehension? Will we ever figure stuff out, or will there always be things beyond our comprehension? Take a minute and just contemplate that. Now, last contemplation or question. What will it be like when you die? Perhaps you have a belief about that, but go beyond your belief and allow yourself to be with not truly knowing what will or will not happen when you die. What will it be like when you die? During those questions, if you got in touch with a sense of mystery or smallness, wonder, or even some fear or exhilaration, you were likely moving in the right direction. And remember what that felt like. And as you gradually come back to feeling your chair, allow yourself to open up to small moments of mystery and wonder during the rest of your day. Because in fact, we don't really know anything at the deepest layer. So enjoy the feeling of being in a mysterious and wondrous universe, and have a beautiful day. Welcome back.
Thank you. Worked for me. I not only did I get progressively more and more relaxed, but I felt progressively more spacious as I sort of dropped into that concept free zone I've been talking about.
Mm. Mm.
And because I wasn't trying, as you suggested, I wasn't trying to figure them out.
Yeah.
And to our listeners, if you listen to that and you realize you were trying to figure out the answers to them, maybe try it again. Drop below the neck and see what you feel.
Yeah, it's a learned skill to be able to let go of the mind
It
and
is.
and see or experience the mystery and wonder. And we hope that something we said today spurs you in that direction. And we want to put a shout out to our Patreon supporters for helping this podcast. And we do send you a bunch of extra stuff each month. So if you're interested in being a supporter, go to patreon.com/awareness explorers, and you'll get extra discussions and techniques and articles, etc.
Wonderful.
Any last words as we let go of this exploration and enter into a unknowable, unfathomable universe?
Only this. This thought occurred to me at the end of this conversation. Mystery and wonder isn't a should that you should try to attain so that you will become a spiritual athlete or a spiritually mature or enlightened being. Mystery and wonder are fun.
Yeah. And they're always here when we are not figuring out some way to block it.
Yep. Exactly.
Which we're quite good at, but
We
it
are
doesn't
good at.
doesn't need to be a full-time job.
Yeah.
Well, another fun exploration, Brian, and hopefully our listeners are having fun with it as well. Feel free to tell friends and family about it. Until next time, keep exploring.
Keep exploring.
Thank you for listening to Awareness Explorers. To learn more, you can check out our website at awarenessexplorers.com. Please subscribe to our podcast on your favorite podcast app. We'd love it if you would post a review. And please share our link on Facebook and with family and friends, because knowing yourself as awareness is the greatest gift you can give yourself or someone you love.